Hi, I'm Kristen, and this is the Simple Handmade Everyday Podcast, where I talk about living a creative, intentional life. I like to chat about quilting, knitting, what I'm reading and watching, and a little bit about self-care, productivity, and keeping a cozy, organized home. I've got my cup of tea in hand, so grab yours, and let's settle in for a chat. This is episode 114. Hello, friends! Do you remember me? I'm back! So if you were listening to this and you were a previous listener, just thank you so much for carving out a little time to listen to this. All my plans of having regular podcasts in 2025 obviously did not happen. I am aghast to see that my last podcast was actually in January. But a lot of good living has been happening. Thank you to those of you that reached out just to make sure that nothing bad was going on. Absolutely not. Just working a lot and just having a full life, and I just was not doing a lot of quilting or anything creative really beyond reading. Not that reading is creative really. And so I just didn't feel like I had a lot to talk about, as well as I just wasn't sure where sitting down to podcast sort of fit into my schedule these days. I find it a little strange that I was a very regular podcaster in the years that I was raising 3 kids, but I worked less and I often podcasted when everyone was out of the house, like on a Thursday afternoon or something. And these days, even though, the weekends are, like Saturdays are kind of for chores and Sundays are for fun. And so I just have not been getting to it, but enough excuses. So here's my plan going forward, for what it's worth, is I would like to try to get back to podcasting for now, once a month. I'm trying to maybe set up a schedule and the expectation of the first weekend of the month. And if I cannot really maintain that schedule, then maybe I will just give this up. But I'm not ready to give it up yet. I miss you guys. I miss the camaraderie and hearing from you guys. So that's my plan. So this is going to be one big catch-up episode, although I don't think it's going to be really long, because it's just like one of those things when you talk to somebody every day, you can talk about, all the little things going on. But when you talk to someone once a year, you just hit the highlights, and I think that's where we're at right now. So let me just let you know that, I'm just, I'm still working. I have a little very niche marketing company that's just me. And I've cut down by a couple clients. Last year, I made a really hard decision to cut out a client this year. And I have a whole, I don't know, we'll see. Over the next couple years, I'm going to cut back even more, to the point where I've just got my one big client. That is my goal, really by about 2027, to just be down to one client and work about 15 to 20 hours a week. That would just be so ideal to me. So that's, what's kind of going on for work. I have been able, for work, one thing I do like about this little business that I have is that I attend this meeting every year, and every other year it's in Europe. So a couple years ago, I went to Stockholm, which was amazing. My husband came at the end of the trip, and we did like a long weekend where we really did Stockholm and saw all the things. The year after that was in Nashville, which was fine, and now I've been to Nashville. Don't really need to go back, but I'm glad I've been. And this year was in Barcelona. Now, Barcelona was a city not on any bucket list or radar of mine at all, but oh my gosh, I love Barcelona. My husband came out. We went early and did about 5 days in Barcelona, and then he flew back, and then I had my meeting, and then I actually stayed a couple extra days and did my own thing in Barcelona. But what an amazing city, which apparently was not even like a tourist destination at all until the 1990, Olympics. And that's what really kind of put it on the map as a tourist destination. And then the World Cup was there recently. And they really built out the whole marina area, which is where our hotel was very close to the marina. And so that was all like built out for the Olympics. And it was just amazing. I drank my body weight in sangria, and my husband and I, we did, if you've been, the Familia Sagrada is the big cathedral there, and that is done by, Gaudí is the architect, and we also went to Casa Batlló, which is another Gaudí property, which was amazing. And we went to the Picasso Museum and the Miro Museum, and I went to the Banksy Museum. Plus, just lots of wandering around, eating so much tapas. It was amazing. So did not even know that was a place I wanted to go, but I absolutely loved it. And then just last month, we had a family vacation. All the kids came in, and we went to Bass Lake for about 9 days. And then one of those days, we went up to Yosemite. And we'd done a very similar vacation 19 years ago when the kids were little. Bass Lake, went up to Yosemite. And while we were there, we recreated a picture of them in this, I think it's called Cook's Meadow, in this field, and with Half Dome in the background. So I need to do a little side-by-side thing with there. But it was just so great. It was one of those very laid-back, we're on the lake. We rented a boat one day, rented a jet ski one day, but a lot of days just sat around and read and napped and things like that. So that was great. Speaking of kids, my youngest son graduated from college, from UCSD, and will be headed to NYU in January for a PhD program in bioengineering. So there was just a lot of uncertainty about what he was going to be doing when he got out of school, and so I'm glad it's finally settled. So he has been with us since graduation in June, and he will stay here with us until he moves to New York. I can't believe I'm saying that, in January. So there's a whole lot of stuff we need to figure out. We've just, for moving the kids down to San Diego, we just rent a U-Haul and take it down there. When Chloe moved to Chicago, they rented a U-Haul, but we're not renting a U-Haul for this college kid. So we need to figure out where he's going to live and what he's going to need and all that kind of stuff. So it's exciting and nervous-making all at the same time, but we're super excited about that. And that's the big catch-up of what's going on over here. I don't want to spend too much time navel gazing here, so we'll move on to quilting now. So as I mentioned before, I've really not been doing a lot of sewing. Probably in my January podcast, I didn't even really look at what I talked about there, but I do know that last December I sent 3 quilts to my long armor Deanna in Illinois. I sent her 3 quilts and just said, if you could turn one around quickly, I wanted to give it to my youngest son, Ben, his girlfriend for Christmas. And she turned that sucker around so fast, and I got it bound and was able to give it to her for Christmas, which that was really nice. And so then in January, Deanna quilted the other 2 quilts and sent them to me. And they have been sitting on a chair in my sewing area ever since. And we're now in October. So I did start quilting. One of them was the Modern Log Cabin, and I am binding that with white binding, which is a little weird for me. I hope I do not regret that choice. But I've been working on that. Sometimes in the evenings, I've been trying to get myself back into the flow of things. But I really notice I need to work on my posture when I'm hand sewing or knitting, because I'm all slumped on the couch, and I really feel it in my neck and shoulders. And I do this kind of I don't know what you call it, like a boot camp style workout, 3 mornings a week. And so when we're stretching, and I can really feel, I'm like, oh yeah, I was sewing last night. I was knitting or whatever, because it's all kind of in knots right there. So I need to work on my posture there. But so I'm working on that. And then I'm kind of in a place right now where I would really just like to use what I have. I've got some scrap quilt ideas, and instead of, because I'm in this kind of in-between thing. On the other hand, I think, what if you bought some new fabric and got a new pattern and got really excited about sewing again? Because sometimes scrap quilting not as inspiring. But I'd like to use what I've got. So I'm going to finish that project. I still have this great granny square quilt, which was the other quilt that was quilted that I want to bind. So I want to get those 2 quilts done. And I'm on the lookout still for a quilt to put over the bed. Well, really, I could use 2 of these. In the other room. So I'm now in what we would call Chloe's room that Ben uses as his office. And I did that Ridges quilt, which I did finish. I don't know if did I ever post that? I don't know. I quilt, I made it. It's quilted, it's bound, it's hanging above the bed. I love it. So that worked out beautifully. I need something like that for over the bed in the other kids' room. And every once in a while I get on Instagram or I look around and I just can't find. This was just so perfect because it was mountain ranges and it was a quilt where, I could just use half of it. It's like, I'm looking at it, it's probably 60 wide and 36 tall or something. So it's very horizontal, very perfect for over the bed. And I just have not been able to find the right thing, but I would love to and just have that project done. And then, I'm doing them for these rooms that have only, existed in their current form for a couple years, but I could use a quilt over my bed in the master bedroom. We've been here for 29 years. And that would be nice too. I do have a little quilt over there, but it's like square. It's not the right quilt for that. So if you have any ideas, really this Ridges quilt, I think it was Tracy from Joyfully Tracy that suggested, I'm not sure if she suggested this quilt. She may have, but she told me to go to Lisa Marie Quilts and she did this quilt. And then, and that has worked out well. So that is the one thing, a new project that I would like to get to. And I've got a bunch of Lori Holt scrap pattern books and stuff. So I just would like to, get back to using what I have. And I'm trying to get into the routine again at the end of the day, after the dishes are done, to just do 15 minutes of something creative, which often ends up being more than that. But I've just gotten into a habit really of reading. I've read a lot of books this year. We'll talk about later. But then I often start to fall asleep. So it would be better if I left the reading for a little bit later and did something else. What else? I'm also all registered for QuiltCon. So I'll go to QuiltCon in February with my QuiltCon crew that we've done the last few years. It's back in Raleigh this year, so I'm super excited about that, and that always kind of gets me inspired, even though I have yet to really make a true modern quilt. I guess my modern log cabins is a modern quilt, but I haven't designed a modern quilt, so I'm looking forward to that. Let me know, in the comments or something, if anybody's going. The Raleigh location was so good last time. So that was fun. And that last time, we have a different Airbnb this year, but the last time I went to the Raleigh show, we were in this Airbnb that had recently been used to film a movie with Anne Hathaway. And that movie came out, I can't remember what it was called. And it's not my kind of movie, but it was kind of like a May-December romance thing. But I did just kind of scoot through enough to go, yep, that's the kitchen, that's the living room. Oh, they put a piano in. They didn't have a piano there, And so that was really fun to see that on the screen. The other thing I wanted to mention is my friend Frances over at the Off Kilter Quilt. I've talked about her Story Guild before. It's a membership. It's a Patreon. It was a membership site. Now it's a Patreon, and she's doing super fun things over there where, she writes quilt fiction. And so she's writing stories and, reading them as audiobooks. And she also does these, pretty regular they're called Back Porch Diaries, where she just, she's on the porch of her house there and in North Carolina, and she just, has a little chat with you for 20-30 minutes about all kinds of interesting things. She is a woman of great depth, so she's just talking about gardening and coziness and quilts and probably poetry if I know her. I haven't even watched them all. There's so many. So I totally encourage you to go check that out. You can sign up for free, at some level, or to check it out for a little bit. And I'll put a link in the show notes to that, which brings me to the thing I forgot to talk about in the intro, which is I'm not really shopping at Amazon anymore, so I'm not going to be doing a lot affiliate links. And one of the stumbling blocks for me in recording the podcast is doing the show notes. If you've ever been over to the website, there's usually photos, Pretty much everything I talk about is there, a lot of them with links and stuff, and it takes a while. And so the recording, whenever I'm done recording, I always think, well, if I could just, if somebody would just take it from here, I would do this every week. So I'm going to shortchange the show notes from now on. I would kind of like to hear from you guys how many of you have ever even been over to the website, to the show notes. I don't think very many. That's the impression I get. And if I look at the stats on my website, I think that kind of bears up. So I will post this. I will create a blog entry for this. And, if I promised, I'm going to highlight this right now, a link, I will include that. But probably not everything with links the way I used to do. And that might just help me get over myself in actually recording a podcast and posting it. I also, as I often do, forgot to talk about the cup of tea I'm drinking, because I am drinking a cup of tea here, even though on this Saturday afternoon, it's almost time I could be having a glass of wine. But it's my Harney & Sons Blue Currant black tea. And oh my gosh, it's so good. I kind of forgot I had it for a while. And so I'm just all about it right now. Just that with a little splash of milk. It's delicious. All right, let's move on to knitting. No. Before we do knitting, the other quilty thing that I've been working on, and maybe I talked about it in January, is I have a bunch of hand-pieced blocks from a Fat Quarter Shop charity thing from 2017 or something, for a long time ago. It was a Bonnie and Camille one. And I had made all the blocks and just wasn't doing anything with them. So I finally laid them all out and, figured out the layout and my idea. So now I need to put sashing between them. I think it's probably just an inch finished sashing between all the blocks. And there's 9 rows. And so my idea was that I would just do 1 row a month, because it's just sashing between, I don't know, maybe 9 blocks. I mean, this is all hand sewing, all hand piecing. It seemed very doable, and it was. And I was really going gangbusters for a while, and I did not meet that goal. I should have finished last month, but I think I've probably done 6 of the rows, and so I'm really not that far behind. So that's my other sewing project. Is hand piecing those, and once those are done, then I will just do the long sashing strips between the rows, and then I will have that quilt long armed. I will not hand quilt that, but I'm kind of happy that I've made progress on it. I mean, those blocks have just sat finished for 5, 6, 7 years, so I'm actually gonna finish that. So that will be 3. If I can get that done, I don't know if I'll get that done this year. It doesn't really matter to me as long as I'm moving on it, but that will be 3 complete finishes this year, which will be very nice. Okay, so now knitting. Also not doing a ton of knitting, but again, in the interest in finishing things, 4 years ago, a bunch of us cast on this thing called the Elementary Shawl from Pearl Soho, and it uses, the version that I'm doing, they seem to sort of reinvent it once a year, is using this wool linen blend yarn, and it's fingerling weight. So, and it's just taken forever because it's like sock yarn. And I think I bought 3 balls, and I'm on the 3rd ball of yarn. And I think I'm just going to mostly just finish the yarn. And I'm probably halfway through this ball of yarn. And one of the reason I abandoned it, and I had kind of abandoned cross-stitching, was because I was having some real issues with my shoulder and also with my wrist. And so I knit continental. And so on this Elementary Shawl, it's very simple. It's one of those mindless things. You do a little 3-stitch border, it changes depending on where you are. And then it's just, knit, flip it over, purl, 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 purl. And when you purl continental, in order to get the tension on the yarn right so that it doesn't slip off, you have to kind of keep your wrist angled down, and that can get painful after a while. So I don't even know how I came across this, but I learned how to do something called the Norwegian purl, where all the action's really happening in your right hand, not your left hand, which is the one that hurts. And so that was one thing I taught myself over vacation at Bass Lake is how to do the Norwegian purl and really practice it. I was really worried that it was going to give me a very different tension and that you're going to see, oh, this is exactly when you switch to the Norwegian purl. But I don't think that's the case. I think it's pretty seamless. And sometimes I use it and sometimes I don't. But that was kind of a good thing to discover, is that there is a way out of this, because I didn't want to pick that thing up because it always ended up hurting. So I'm going to keep plugging away at that and hopefully get that thing done and blocked and be able to wear it this winter. So like I had thought I would do 4 years ago, but no. So here we are. So that's kind of fun. Also, when I was in Barcelona, after one of the days at the end of the trip, when I was just on my own and I was just wandering around through all these, medieval streets, and I mean, it's just amazing. I found this yarn store that was like, it had a sign that said something about stop buying souvenir, bleep, and buy some good yarn. I was like, that's a really good idea. So I went in there and I bought some sock yarn. So I think that I will pretty soon cast on some Barcelona socks. I've been making vanilla socks lately. I did finish a pair of socks this year, but I think I'll do something it's pretty, it's hand dyed, but it's just, like one color, just a little uneven. And so I'll find something that has a little bit of a pattern in the calf, just to make it a little bit more interesting. I did a pair of Hermione socks a few years ago, which has a really interesting texture. I might do something like that. So if you happen to have a favorite sock pattern, let me know. I don't want to do anything like cables. I wanted to keep it pretty simple, because socks are kind of a little bit of the mindless knitting, but I wouldn't mind doing something a little bit more complicated. So let me know if you've got a favorite sock pattern. The other thing I've been dipping my toe into, so to speak, from a creativity standpoint, is watercolor. I kind of want to learn to watercolor. Now, I want to make it very clear that I cannot draw. So I don't have any big dreams about doing big landscapes and stuff, but I like, there's a lot of sort of very simple flowers and funky shapes and just a little bit more abstract stuff that I would like to learn how to do. So I invested in just a little bit of, a few materials. I bought a class from, I don't know how you say it. It's like Udemy. It was only about $15, $17, a watercolor class. Kind of started watching that. But then my friend Patty said, did you try Creative Bug? And I did, which is, kind of like Craftsy, and they had a sale. It's like $1.99 for 6 months or something like that. I need to get back to it because I'm going to run out of time on that. But those two classes have been kind of helpful. Watercolor is hard. I mean, we haven't really done much that is fun. It's more like learning how to mix and control the paint. So I've been working on that, but there are some fun watercolor people on YouTube, like Andrea Nelson Art and somebody else, like Unicorn something. If I think of it, I'll put that in the show notes. And they do a lot of like YouTube shorts just showing you, like I made a really pretty purple coneflower one day. So it's kind of fun to, like instead of skipping ahead in these lessons, just like do these little exercises that they have, some of these watercolor people have on YouTube. Like make some really pretty flowers. And so I've been playing around with that a little bit. Really, I could probably benefit from taking an actual class, and maybe I will do that at some point. But right now I'm just trying to kind of work that into something that I do in the evening. It's a little bit hard to make myself get all the stuff out for watercolor, if you know what I mean. But I'm very interested in it, and I want to see if that's something that I could play with. And I think that this working with the colors and stuff, I think that will all really help my quilting and even knitting, just color combinations and the color wheel and working with that. So just something I'm kind of playing around with trying to really keep a beginner's mindset on it and not be too down on myself when things don't really work out. All right, let's move on to books. As I said, I've been reading a lot this year, and I think I counted up. I keep a Trello list of all the books that I've read. I learned that from the Lazy Genius. Use a Trello board, and I have all the books I've read for this year. It's my to be read list is on there, and what I'm currently reading, and you can just drag these little cards around on the Trello board to kind of keep track, and it's been nice. So I've read a lot. I won't go into a lot of it, but I just wanted to hit a few of the highlights with you. I finished the Maisie Dobbs series. I probably talked about that in my last podcast. Even, I'm not sure when I finished it exactly, but it's 18 books. And I listened to some, I read some. The reader's really good. And Maisie Dobbs is this, I've talked about her before, this young woman. It starts in... the book it starts, I think, right after World War I, but you certainly, in retrospect, find out what happened to Maisie in her childhood and when she was a nurse in the war, and what leads her to becoming a private detective. And and then it's 18 books, so she grows up. And it's a very sweet story. I mean, there's lots of ups and downs in her life. And, of course, there's always, the case to solve per book. But, there's obviously big overarching, stories and themes that go through the whole series. So I highly recommend that. I also read the Thursday Murder Club series. They recently turned that into a movie on Netflix, which was fun and did a decent job. It was based on the first book, which I had read a while ago, so I was like I couldn't remember who done it at that point. And there's a new one that just came out, so I think there's 4 books in that series now about these 4 people at a very swanky retirement village. And like not a nursing home, but more of a retirement village that start meeting to solve cold cases or to read them and see what they can do. And then murders start happening, and then they start trying to solve those. So that is a really fun series. Speaking of series, I'm really in a completionist mode at this point. I've been reading the Mitford series, which Mitford by Jan Karon. Is this series, and it's many books. I'm trying to think how many, maybe 12 or 15, and it's a little bit religious, but in a very sweet, gentle Christian way. It's about a priest, a Episcopalian priest named Father Tim, and all his shenanigans that happen in this cute little village called Mitford. It's in I think it's in the mountains of North Carolina, I believe. And he gets married early on. Well, he gets married when he's like 62 years old. He's been a bachelor since then, and that really changes the trajectory of things. And it's just full of a very hilarious cast of characters. So it's sweet and kind of, slow moving and quirky. And so I started it many, many years ago and kind of struggled because they're pretty slow books. And the one I'm reading right now is kind of a Christmas themed one. It's called The Shepherd's Abiding, and I'm not loving it. I'm reading it pretty quick, but the last few I have really enjoyed. So I'm just like, I'm on a mission to finish this series, which has been fun. I feel like I'm underselling it here. It's very beloved. Let me just say that. I also read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which was one of those books that I had read about, and then I requested it on Libby, and then I just kept delaying, like deliver later, until I finally said, okay, you got to read this or just let it go. And it was really good. It's by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and it is fiction, but you just feel like, is this based on a real... somebody's real life? And I looked it up, and it is kind of loose. Like there's elements of Elizabeth Taylor, Rita Hayworth, and Ava Gardner. Different elements of Evelyn are borrowed from those real life people. But it's about a older, very famous movie star, like think Elizabeth Taylor, who has been married 7 times, like Elizabeth Taylor, or she was 8 times, 7 husbands, and she wants to get her biography down. So she asked somebody to come in, and she's just going to tell her life story, and that's what most of the book is. The girl that's brought in that's being entrusted with this story, there's other things that are sort of going on with her as well, that kind of tie in, which is really fun. But it was quite a ride with Evelyn Hugo, so I definitely recommend that. And one of the books that I read while I was on vacation, I finished one of the Mitfords, and I read this. It's a nonfiction book called Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb. And I only got that book because I was just perusing Libby, and it was just like looking for like what's available now. And I don't know, I just picked this book, and it's very good. I found out that so interestingly, Lori Gottlieb, she is a therapist. She just launched a podcast with my gal Gretchen Rubin, which I was like, wow, that's so strange. And she writes like a column for maybe Slate or something called like Ask the Therapist. But this woman has had an amazing life. So she's basically my age. She was born in 1966, and she was she worked in TV at NBC, and she worked on the shows Friends and ER. Like she was in the room when Jennifer Aniston and Courtney Cox auditioned, so she was like right in it, like the most, kind of pivotal TV time that was going on. But that really just wasn't doing it for her. Or actually, maybe she was in movies first and then thought TV would be more fun because she was all about telling stories. So she did that. And then she decided she wanted to be a doctor, so she went to medical school for a while, but then decided she didn't want to do that. She was going to be a journalist, but that didn't really work out. So then she became a therapist. And I've never personally been in therapy, but she talks about, she's couched different, concealed people's identities or whatever, and melded people together. But she talks about various people that she's seeing and their stories. And she went through a really terrible breakup sort of at the beginning of this book. So she seeks out a therapist. So you find out what's happening in her therapy sessions versus, where she's the therapist. And she's really a terrible therapy patient, which is kind of hilarious. But anyways, it was just the whole story. She's a very interesting person, and this whole therapy aspect was very interesting. And we've been watching, I'll get to this in a bit, but we've been watching The Sopranos. So it's very interesting because there's a lot of therapy that's happening in The Sopranos. So that's been kind of a fun comparison. So those were some, good books that I've been reading. There's been many more, but maybe I'll circle back to some in future podcasts. But let's go into, I usually talk about the shows we're watching. As I mentioned, we're watching The Sopranos, which I completely did not watch when it was a thing. But I know it's kind of one of those cultural things, like, Friends or Seinfeld or whatever. So we got HBO this summer. We sign up and drop off various streaming services. We kind of wait for shows to drop, to complete. And then we'll go, okay, now we're going to go over to Netflix or whatever. So that's our show to watch with our son, Ben, at dinner. So that's been really fun. And it is just so of its time. The way the people dress, the way the Sopranos house is directed is just like, oh man, I remember when this would have just been the height of interior decorating, and it looks so dated now. And the hair, oh my gosh, the hair that his wife has, I can't think of the actress name. Is that Edie Falco? I think that's Edie Falco and Lorraine Brock. I can't remember. It's a therapist. I can't remember her name. Anyways, so that's been really fun. Kind of shows that I've been kind of watching myself. Acorn dropped a show called Irish Blood with Alicia Silverstone. believe it or not. And that was really fun to watch. It was not a great mystery, but I really enjoyed her in that. And another one from Acorn is the show called Recipes for Love and Murder. And oh my gosh, I really enjoyed the show. It took me a while to get around to watching it. I'm like, what is that really about? And it takes place in South Africa, I believe. And this woman, she writes a recipe column for this tiny little town. And for this tiny little newspaper, she writes this recipe column. And then she gets the word that the recipe column is going to be canceled because they want an advice column. And so she ends up taking on the advice column, but she works a recipe into it every time. Like there's always some excuse to make something, either to sort of make amends with someone, or to woo someone, or to drown your sorrows, or whatever. And the cinematography or videography or whatever of the show is so cool. She lives. Her name is Tani Maria, and this is based on a book, maybe a book series. And I tried the book; it did not stick with me. But I really did like the show. She lives in this very cool house in South Africa. In the kitchen, it's one of those just charmingly cluttered kitchens that she's cooking in. It just made me want to get in the kitchen. The woman who is the actress wears these beautiful dresses. I'm like, I would wear a dress every day if I had access to these dresses. But one of the people that write to her for the advice column is worried about her abusive husband, and she ends up dead. And so Tani Maria, and then the investigative journalist that also works at the paper, this young girl, they get together and so they start solving mysteries. But just I was so charmed by the costumes and the sets and the recipes. Was like amazing. So that was really fun. And what else? Right now, I know, also on HBO, The Gilded Age. That was when I kept saying, when we get back to HBO, I want to watch this thing called The Gilded Age. And so I was able to binge probably the first 3 seasons. And then like a few weeks after I was done with that, the next season, like the 4th season dropped. I thought it was over. So that was kind of bonus. But talk about really enjoying the sets and the costumes. So that's just, it's the Gilded Age of the United States. It's all the society in New York. And we're dropping names like the Rockefellers and J.P. Morgan and all that stuff. And it really coincides with reality. It's a fiction show, but I did double check some things. There's an opera house. What I didn't really understand was the real divide between people with old money and new money, and how the people with new money were really not accepted into society. Like, for instance, they could not get like box seats at the opera. So they go on and build their own opera house, which is the Met Opera House today. That's the opera that endured. So that was a fun show. I definitely recommend that. And also the #1 Ladies Detective Agency, which was a series of books that I read years and years ago. And I never finished. There's a lot of them, but I certainly, read many of them. And so this was fun because this was, based on those books. It was also, it's in Botswana. And so just, again, the dresses that the main character wears, they're so gorgeous, just like everyday dresses, but the styles and the designs are so amazing. And so that was really fun. And they have just kind of a very interesting speech pattern, which was fun. And it's got a lot of humor and some, there's always, again, the story of the episode, but then some like bigger story arcs. So those were kind of some of the more fun things that I've been watching kind of lately. I don't want this to be too long, so I'm going to wrap this up with my last segment, which is a bit of a hodgepodge of topics. So I am going to be turning 60 next year in March. And so I'm starting what I've called Project 60. And it is to sort of, it's like, if not now, when, Kristen, are you going to start doing something? So there's this combination of moving forward on a number of health goals that I have, which are, kind of personal. I've always talked about that. I want to lose some weight, and that would help a whole lot of other very minor little health goals, little health things that are creeping up. And I want to just really get on track and feel like by the time I hit my birthday, things are definitely, I've turned this ship around and I'm moving in the right direction. But also, I've been doing a lot of thinking and journaling about, like, what do I want my 60s to look like? How much, what do I want my work to look like? When do I want to retire? How do I want to fill my time? One thing I haven't talked about is that I did a big garden this year. Well, big for me, it's not really a big garden. It's a small garden. I finally put in 3 raised beds, 4x4 foot raised beds in what was our garden area. Grew tomatoes and cucumbers and zucchini and, all kinds of herbs, put flowers in there. And it just was like such a source of joy. I worked really hard every weekend on the garden. And now those are starting to come up, and I'm planting a fall garden. So I've already ripped out everything in one of those planters, and I've got arugula and spinach and lettuce and radishes in that. I'm starting some cucumber and broccoli seeds, but I also bought some starch that I really need to get in there this weekend. But I'm having a hard time pulling these tomato plants up because there's a lot of green tomatoes on them, but they're not ripening. I think it's getting too cold at night. It's plenty warm during the day, but it is dipping, into the mid to low 50s at night. So I think that's why they're not ripening. But I'd like to kind of keep a year-round garden there, and just, also just my flower beds and things like that. Just worked really hard, spent a lot of time out there and totally enjoyed it over the spring and summer. But so, and I've thought about maybe taking master gardening classes or just kind of really digging into growing more of our own food. But I mean, we're in a suburban backyard. I'm not going to grow a ton, but just the stuff that I really loved having tomatoes and basil and stuff this summer. That was so much fun. I'm going to be taking another pickleball class. We're going to start picking up golf. Just like what other kind of classes do I want to take? I've always wanted to take a pottery class. My husband and I are starting to talk about, okay, what are some places that we would like to travel? He would like to go to Okinawa in Japan. And to just start, I've always wanted to go on a Viking river cruise. So just kind of putting some thought into what I want this next decade to look like. The other thing is that I'm doing this little fun mental exercise of pretending that we're moving. We're not moving that we know of right now, but and I just want to go through each room and pretend that we're moving. So I've been through my desk and some shelves and things like that. Finally getting rid of some things I've been holding on to, and not just from a decluttering standpoint, but that is part of it. We decluttered pretty well about 8 years ago, but stuff does creep back in. But also fixing all the little things that if we were going to sell the house, we would have to fix anyways. We really needed to replace the blinds in our kitchen. They've been here for 29 years, for as long as we've been here, and they just, for a number of reasons, needed to be replaced. And so we did that. But just, we've got this little window to the side of our front door that has a broken blind there that the dogs get in when the UPS guy comes or something. And what I would like to do is get rid of that blind and put a stained glass piece there. And so I've already contacted somebody about that. So not only decluttering, but also, just fixing all those little things, especially during, again, these last few years that we're going to be working. We still need to redo the kids' bathroom, which I'm really dreading, but I think that's a 2026 project. So that's been kind of interesting to really go through. You just stop seeing things. So to look at each room with sort of a critical eye. And this is starting to get a little bit long, but after Ben moves to New York, I I'm toying with the idea of taking the loft, which is full of his drums and musical equipment. He's going for a PhD. He's going to be gone 5 years. We do not need to keep that as a shrine anymore. And maybe getting my sewing stuff up out of the dining room and up into the loft. So we'll see. So kind of playing around with those ideas as well. But this is something, there's no timetable on this. I just want to feel like I am consistently moving forward on it. So I don't know. I think that's kind of a fun exercise to just say, And the fun part about pretending we're moving but we're not is that you don't have to be quite as disciplined as if you were moving, because you're like, okay, if I was moving, I probably wouldn't pack this, but I actually think I am going to keep it. So I think that's about it for this first podcast of trying to get back into it. This is where I usually say, visit my blog at Simple Handmade Everyday. And I will post this with some brief show notes, but I am also kind of making a conscious decision to be on social media a lot less. So I'm not doing anything interesting on social media right now, so I won't even talk about the places you can find me because it's a very boring situation for you there. But I am glad to be back. Thank you for listening, and you have a wonderful week.